Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name is Kevin.
I'm John.
And we are the Real Movie Guys. On today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at Coco. Aspiring musician Miguel, confronted with his family's ancestral ban on music, enters the land of the dead to find his great-grandfather, a legendary musician. So, John, this is a movie that's quite on replay at your house, you would say?
Oh yeah, I think I've seen this movie honestly over 100 times.
Over 100 times. Wow.
At least.
That's a lot of times.
I know. Thank God for Disney Plus, because I don't have to keep putting it in each time.
Seriously. No, I guess there's some convenience to that. This movie is one of the very few movies we actually get about the Day of the Dead, I would say. We don't really get many movies exploring that concept. There's the argument that The Book of Life was also a big movie about this, but there's comparisons, and I'm not going to get into all that with this. This review is just about Coco. If you want Book of Life, let us know. I'm not going into that movie. Coco, though, I'll admit, when I first saw the early trailers for this film, I wasn't that excited for it. I was like, oh, it's just another generic Pixar movie coming out. I didn't really see anything too spectacular or interesting. When I actually sat down to watch this movie, though, it blew me away.
Well, the first thing that drew me into this movie was I heard the soundtrack of it 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of drew me into this movie because I enjoyed the soundtrack. But sometimes when you enjoy a soundtrack and then you go watch the movie, it disappoints.
Sure.
But this was definitely one of those movies that, I don't love watching it 100 times, but
well, yeah, you're a little split on that, I guess, the viewing. But for our intensive purposes, there's a lot to get into. My main feeling why this movie works to the degree that it does is its integration of culture into the story. This movie lives and breathes its culture. Every aspect of it's affected, from the art style to the music, the way people speak, just everything is affected by the culture. And the way it integrates that in such an accessible way, I think is fantastically done.
I feel like it's got the right mix of everything in it too.
Mm-hmm.
Just from the culture to story to the music, everything's very well done, put together. I feel like it's a great narration about the Day of the Dead.
Right, and that's a main aspect of it too, just exploring the ideas behind the Day of the Dead and going into those themes. The themes of this movie by far are incredible, especially the way they integrate the culture. You're going to hear me say that a lot, but again, the culture of this movie is essential to everything that transpires. The themes they tackle, I truly love. I think they're mature themes. This movie really was a little more brave, I think, than the average Pixar movie. It took on things that they're not things we normally explore. Accepting death by celebrating memory is an extremely important theme that it's hard to explain to children. Would you agree, John?
Yeah, definitely. I also like the way that they make it an awesome kind of place. When you die, it's almost you go to this place, and the way that they make this place where people go when they die, so awesome the way that they did it.
Right, and that really captures the whole spirit of Dia de los Muertos, the whole concept of Day of the Dead. The reason for the celebration is that after death, you're no longer bound, right? So you can even argue, ironically, that the other world, the spiritual world, is more bright and colorful and exciting than the real world because it's not held down by any kind of limits to your imagination. When you pass, you're released. And this movie captures that the city is gorgeous. The colors, the vibrancy. This movie tackles a lot of excellent technical things as well. I think of all the Pixar movies I've seen, even just starting from the original Toy Story up until where we are, current gen with their movies, this movie's attention to detail is ridiculous. Everything from the cityscapes, if you look at the ground, you can literally see I think there's an example when they're on stage and they're singing, you can see every etching in the wood, which is crazy for a movie, crazy for an animated movie. Just everything has vibrance and life to it.
Even the bridge, just the fact of them going over the bridge, it's such an amazing well done, very awesome lighting and just everything looks just like how you would think that in your mind it would kind of look, but even like done up even better than that.
Right. I mean, the whole vibrancy of the flower they use, which I didn't find this out till recently, so again, excuse my ignorance. It was the Aztec marigold is the name of that flower, the orange flower that's constantly referenced and peddled throughout this movie. Those petals just, again, the vibrance that they show, and they almost feel supernatural at times, right? Just because of that, the glow that they add to it.
Oh yeah,
And that's really
definitely.
hard to do. I mean, I don't know if people give, I mean, every people give Pixar credit, of course, but the amount of depth and attention to detail in every single petal to animate that and make them move is insane. Just from a technical standpoint alone, you can argue if you really wanted to be that guy, which unfortunately I'm gonna be that guy just for a second.
You're that guy.
It is a generic story overall. It really doesn't do anything new as far as the whole liar reveal when we find out, Ernesto's actually a liar and he killed Hector. Again, spoilers, you were warned in the beginning, so I don't want to hear you coming at me. It's cliche, right? Getting the acceptance from the family. We've seen all those tropes before, but the reason, at least to me, I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me. Again, some people will be put off by it and say, well, it's nothing new. The fact that this movie has so much heart behind that it brings out the emotions. This movie is a very emotional movie, especially towards the end, which we're going to talk about. Like we've said many a times, cliches can be good, cliches can be bad. If you can do something around those cliches that's entertaining to make me forget that they are cliches, then good for you. You did a good job. That's what you're going to do. I mean, there's the arguable theory. There's only so many stories you can actually tell that are new and original. So you have to find creative ways to introduce those same themes to us. And another reason this works so well is just the world building in general. I feel like it's hard to explain, but when I watch this movie, I feel like I'm in the middle of a story. Do you get that feeling? Like from the intro, the beginning intro, they have the banners when they introduce Coco and they introduce the family and the history. I almost feel like I've known this family for a little bit. So I'm not so blown away when the story actually starts and we get into finding out, music's banned. Feel the tradition and legacy behind everything. I feel like I'm caught up at that point, if that makes any sense. I wish more like TV shows would do this in general when I watch things. Like I feel like I'm immersed, right? I'm immersed right from the get-go for this movie. And I care what happens to Miguel. I see, how upset he is and how he wants to have music. And what this movie does is very different with family, right? We see the love of family, which is always heavily played on, but it plays on something I think we don't see very often in movies, is the flaws behind family. Would you agree?
I definitely think it shows something that could impact somebody in your family.
Well, it shows
It
both
then
sides.
changes your family.
Right, it shows both sides where you need the love and support of your family, but at the same time you can't be afraid to acknowledge that there's flawed thinking. For example, Miguel's family, they want to ban music because Hector never came back to his great grandma, so music's been banned ever since, and they just have this strong hatred for it. But that's a flaw innately, because that's keeping Miguel from being who he is, and they say you're not allowed to be a musician. No one can like music. It's holding back this family, and it's a flaw that they acknowledge, right? That they made a mistake, that wasn't the right thing, and we don't get that very often. Again, where we see a family shown that it's not perfect. This isn't the perfect Disney family. They actually do have flaws and things they have to work around. There's such emotional depth behind each character. I want to get into the characters just a little bit now. Everyone's really well done. I wouldn't say there's really anyone too much of note as far as who I could see. Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm missing something. That could very well be. There's no big voice actors that I would say I know, at least personally off the bat, but everyone does an excellent job conveying. I mean, I'm glad that you were able to cast a Hispanic group of actors to portray these. There was no whitewashing of the cast. If you want to get real serious with this topic, everyone, they sounded organic and natural. Like no one was off-putting in that regard. Some of my favorite characters, I definitely love the character of Hector. Just how flawed and real he felt. Hector ends up being the great grandfather of Miguel, because he gets transported to this other world and he's trying to find his way home, and the only way he can do that is by getting his family's blessing. Under some circumstances, he believes Ernesto de la Cruz, the famous singer, is his grandfather, when in actuality it's Hector, who he's been traveling with the whole time to try and visit Ernesto. Hector, I really think he's a really deep character. One of my favorite scenes is when they have to go get a guitar from one of the characters. Miguel needs a guitar in order to play at the festival that's happening so he can get the opportunity to see Ernesto. So Hector takes him to see this man who has a guitar, and the man's dying, essentially. And in their words, when you die in the land of the dead here, your memory's fading to where no one will remember you, then your soul passes on into nothing, essentially. Miguel asks him where he goes, and Hector just simply says, I don't know.
Wait, what happened?
He's been forgotten. When there's no one left in the living world who remembers you, you disappear from this world. We call it the final death.
Where did he go?
No one knows.
That's such a powerful scene, in my opinion. Death is such a hard thing to explain, especially to children. So giving them an answer, whether your religion, your faith, whatever you believe is right or wrong, the actuality is we don't know that answer. What happens after?
Yeah, nobody could ever.
No one can know because no one came back to tell us. Again,
Yeah,
based on all right, I know I'm getting controversial there, but based on what we've seen and whatnot, no one's able to tell us that answer, and the movie just flat out says I don't know. And then Hector plays a song to serenade the man as he passes, and he takes the shot, the alcohol shot, and he leaves one for his friend as he's passing away. It's just a really beautiful scene.
But I've met him. I could remember him when I go back.
No, it doesn't work like that, chamaco. Our memories, they have to be passed down by those who knew us in life, in the stories they tell about us. But there's no one left alive to pass down Chicha's stories. Hey, it happens to everyone eventually.
Come on, De La Cruzito. You've got a contest to win.
And again, even in this land of happiness, they're ultimately... The way they explain death, I think, is interesting to the fact that it'll come for you eventually. Eventually, you will be forgotten. It's going to happen, hopefully not for a long time, but it will happen eventually.
Also, the people that pass away, you want to still always remember them and never let their memory fade in your mind, because if you always are remembering them, then they're always going to be there no matter what.
Right.
Even though they're not physically here. But at least in your mind, they're still here.
Right. And one of my biggest critiques was back when we reviewed Frankenweenie on the channel, I had said they brought Sparky back to life in that movie. And I remember I told you I wasn't a fan of that, right? It felt like a cop-out to me at the end. This movie goes all the way in that regard. The scene at the end of this movie is very beautiful. It's beautifully sad, and the way it tells its message is phenomenal. At the end of the movie, Miguel, he's going back. He has to try and get Mama Coco to remember her father, Hector, because Hector in the land of the dead is passing, or he's moving on. His memory's being faded, and Mama Coco's also losing her memory and dying as well. So when she dies, unless she can find a way to memorialize Hector, he'll pass on permanently. So Miguel rushes home, and a phenomenal scene just play. I can't tell you, there's not a dry eye in my house whenever that scene literally comes on, where Miguel is singing Remember Me to Mama Coco to help her remember her father.
Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar. Know that I'm with you, the only way that I can be. Until you're in my arms again. Remember me.
The interaction between the two of them, you can just see her remembering her father. You can just see her slowly perking up, coming to life. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful scene.
Papa was a musician. When I was a little girl, he and Mama would sing such beautiful songs.
I have actually an anecdote, just a short thing about this movie. So when I watched this movie, I guess guess around the time it came out, a little bit after. I was at my wife's house. We were watching this movie, and her grandma, who was with us at the time, she no longer is, she was actually watching this movie. I don't know why she was in the room. I think she was just hanging out, and she was watching this movie. And when that scene came on, I looked over, and she was crying. I could see like the emotion building in her over that scene, and just see the tears start to flow, as if she's relating to that scene on like a deeper level than even I can fathom. And I think that just every time I think of that scene, that just encapsulates it perfect for me, to where even though that person's leaving and they know they don't have much time left, if you can keep their memory alive just in you, just by remembering them, whether it's something silly like a memory like that, or if you honor them on a birthday, an anniversary, whatever the case is, they never die. And that's a better message than where we were going with Frankenweenie, where your dog's dead, you just shock him back to life, and here we go, and good to go. This movie's attempting to do something deeper, to explain to children that even though someone's not here, that doesn't mean they're gone, as long as you remember them. And I can't express to you people at home how important that message is, especially for children. Now, is there anything else to you that you feel is important as far as this film?
I feel like also the one thing that really continues to get me through like each time I watch this movie is the music and the vibrant colors patterns that they use in this movie.
Right.
I feel like that draws children in.
Right, and that's what I was going to ask you too. I'm glad you actually went into that. Now, you have young children at home. Now, your son especially is obsessed with this movie, as we've talked about a little bit earlier. What do you think to him is so enthralling about this movie? Now, you don't really know. He's only a little kid, obviously, so I'm trying to see what do you think really draws him in? Why does he like this movie so much? Because it does resonate with children. My wife is actually a second grade teacher, and the kids still love this movie. This movie's still really strong. It's still very appealing. People are even going out on Halloween, currently just to be Miguel. It's still a very strong film in that regard, especially resonates with children. John, what in your opinion do you think makes this movie resonate with children so well?
I think what resonates with most children are the music, the songs, and just the vibrancy of the color. Not necessarily do they have to understand the story completely.
Right.
But as long as they get like a gist of what the story is trying to tell them, they like it. The music brings a lot of children in.
Like we said kind of earlier, it tickles the senses, if you will. It checks off all the boxes that you would look for, especially for a young child, for it to be so appealing. Some of my favorite character design work really is within the dog Dante and the cat Pepita. I love those two characters. I think they're iconic in their own right, the way they look. Just the fact that they infuse such a vibrance and color, and the fact that they're based on, actual Hispanic lore is incredible. Not to mention, I think there's even, what they actually are is they're spirit guides. They're there to guide the dead. So there's even an even deeper meaning on top of what could be, associated with the typical Disney, animal sidekick. While essentially that is the case, I think, in many regards, still, they're so well done, I kind of forget they are the typical Disney sidekick. They're just so appealing.
After seeing this movie so many times too,
right,
I started to look at like the making of this. And they said that they did go into many small, like, Mexican towns and Spanish towns.
Right.
Looking for things that they could put, or just that they see on the streets and stuff,
right,
that they can throw into this movie where it would make it seem even more authentic.
Disney is well known for that. It's Pixar as well, but, Disney, well, essentially they're one identity now at this point. But throughout the years, you can see just in projects like The Lion King and Mulan, such projects like that, they always go that extra mile to make sure they include what they need to in order to make this as accurate as possible to what they're trying to recreate. There's always an overabundance of footwork done, if you will, in these movies, which really shines through, especially, like I said, this movie's no joke when it comes to that. Everything I feel like is incredibly accurate. One thing too, like I said, this movie is very dark. Again, it kind of overcomes that darkness by aesthetically being so bright. But not even that. I think one of the most underrated aspects is the comedy in this movie. This movie's really funny at times. I found myself really laughing a lot harder than I probably had any right to, especially with Ernesto de la Cruz. Is probably one of my favorite villains. Again, He is the stereotypical villain, like I said earlier. He is the liar reveal, he's actually the bad guy. The theme is so dark where he literally murdered his best friend. He poisoned him and killed him and took his music and left him to die. That's so dark, but at the same time, he's so funny and has some of the best lines, especially when the bell drops on him when they're telling his backstory, then how that comes full circle at the end and they drop it on top of him again. But again, the comedy overall is just extremely well integrated to where even though you have such a dark sense of storytelling, the comedy and just the bright visuals help kind of balance that out. It's a good balance between light and dark. So I think we're at that point though where we're going to give our final scores. I'm going to give Coco an A+.
I'm gonna play in the plaza, just like you did.
In my opinion, this is one of the best Pixar movies made to date. As far as Pixar movies, this is top tier, for sure. The storytelling, the themes it touches on, this movie's an instant classic. There's if anything, negative, any of the negativity that really surrounds this movie, I'm one of those few people that don't understand how you can find, like I said, maybe the only negative that truly can be found is it's not overtly original with its initial plot and storytelling, but I think it's able to circumvent that in such an amazing, beautiful way that that's not a problem for me. If you can, watch this movie. If you already watched it, watch it again. Highest recommendation I can give. John, where do you stand with this film?
I'll give this movie an A.
He is. I am terribly allergic.
But Dante doesn't have any hair.
And I don't have a nose, and yet here we are.
It's just one of those amazing Pixar movies with great music, good storytelling, amazing film work, creativity with everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those movies that you can watch with anybody. And I feel like everybody who watches this movie will get joy out of it.
Right, and I think everybody's going to tear up at some point. It's very hard, again, to find a dry eye when it comes to the end scene of this movie. If anything, I think that was one of the big things that was trending around the time when this movie came out, was everybody was talking about how they were tearing up at the end. I mean, if you got a soul, you're gonna shed some kind of tear at the end of this film. So, John, where can the people find us at home?
You can find us on YouTube, The Real Movie Guys on YouTube. Subscribe, like our channel, so you find out what we're coming up with next. You could also find us on Twitter at The Real Movie Guy. Interact with us there. You can interact with us on YouTube. We always love a great interaction. You could also listen to us on many podcasting platforms such as...
For your listening pleasure, we are also available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Overcast, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Casts. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you already are right now, hey, greatly appreciate it. Just search Real Movie Guys. We should pop right up. Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name is Kevin. That guy over there, he's John. We are The Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. We'll see you next time.